Hello and welcome everybody to another new episode of Money and Me. I'm your host, Abhiruk Bhattacharya, and today we have a very vibrant community on our show today. They are literally everywhere, and when I say everywhere, that is not an understatement. So without further ado, please welcome the co-founder of the Graph ecosystem, Tegan, on the show. Hi there.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I've been meaning to have this interview for a very long time. I researched about you guys. I'm just amazed. And I'll tell you what amazes me the most. You guys are in so many things. I myself am not being able to understand or pinpoint, okay, the graph ecosystem does this, it does that. It's just you guys are everywhere. So for the first question of the interview, if you would tell us what led to the creation of the graph community in
Yeah,
the universe of blockchain, where does the graph find its place?
absolutely. Yes, the graph was founded 4 years ago, and the idea of the graph came about because Brandon Yanis and Yaniv all were going to build an application on Ethereum. And then they realized this very core piece of the stack was missing. And you could kind of do it in a centralized way, but then what's the point of building on a decentralized blockchain like Ethereum if the indexing and query layer is centralized? So they set out to build the graph. And here we are 4 years later. The graph launched the decentralized network in December. And the graph is really EdgeNode's first protocol. And in about 18 months, the graph scaled from 1 billion queries to about 25 billion queries, less than 1 billion queries. And so it's just been explosive growth. And that really speaks to the growth within the entire Web3 ecosystem because the graph supports many different networks in the space, layer one blockchains, layer two blockchains, storage networks, Oracle networks. I feel really grateful because we get to really interact with every ecosystem that exists in the blockchain space. And then app developers get to build applications and pull data using the graph. And so the analogy I like to use is kind of like when you're looking for a book at a library as an example, and imagine walking into the library and all of those books are there, but they're not sorted in alphabetical order. They're just kind of thrown all over the place. And that was kind of like the data on Ethereum because the blockchains don't natively index and query the data. And so that's where the graph kind of comes in to help developers access data quickly so that when you walk into that library, all the books are sorted in alphabetical order and you can find your book in a second or less than a second. And so the graph really helps kind of bring users to Ethereum, and the graph really helps to decentralize Ethereum and other blockchains.
Right. So from what you have told me so far, it sounds really complex. So I'm sure that you guys simplify a lot of tasks to your users. So my question to you, Tegan, is let's say that a user runs into some difficulty. How does the user approach the graph? How do you guys manage your way through so many app queries?
Yeah, so the graph uses subgraphs, which are open APIs. And so that's what the developers are picking up and using. The great thing about decentralized protocols like the graph is it's permissionless. And so no one needs to ask permission to use or build a subgraph. And so if when building, there's any issues that anyone runs into, a lot of developers will ask on the Discord, and there are many people across the graph ecosystem that can help, not just within the Graph Foundation or EdgeNode or Figment or Streaming Fast, but also across the community. Like the developers really help one another with any issues that come about. And it's just great to see that kind of organic community form. But yes, anything that anyone needs or any issues that they run into, there's so much support across the ecosystem.
Right. You mentioned Web 3.0 a while back, and what I wanted to ask was your ecosystem often talks about integrating blockchain, growing with data built on Web 3.0. So what I wanted to understand is how would a world with complete Web 3.0 integration look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those listening, Web3 is the decentralized internet, and it's what the graph and many other protocols in this ecosystem are striving towards and building towards. I believe that blockchains are the future of the internet and that all of the centralized internet or Web2 will move on to Web3. And we're already seeing that, DeFi has really proven price discoverability. DeFi was really like underpinned via the graph and Ethereum and other blockchains. And a lot of what happened in DeFi could not happen in the traditional finance space. And there's just so much, there's an explosion of innovation that has happened and is continuing to happen. And now we're seeing disruption in art via NFTs, also governance via DAOs, and how we think about work and coordinating on the internet is changing. How we think about organizations is changing. And, the internet started out, I think, very pure, but what the internet created and incentivized were these companies or applications, centralized applications like Facebook, Google, that spun up. And I think also like a lot of these companies had very pure intentions initially, but the problem is that their monetization and where they monetize really comes from gatekeeping data and kind of selling ads or even selling in the background. Graph really opens that up and makes the data a public good. So with these subgraphs, they're open APIs. So anyone can port any information to their application. Anyone can use subgraphs openly. And we see like decentralized projects using subgraphs, but also centralized companies like CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, some of the most used websites in the entire space, actually pulling data from subgraphs like Uniswap, for example. And this just really explodes all of the innovation, and there's just so much transparency. So it's really exciting to see.
Right. So the graph ecosystem believes that the internet, of course, like you mentioned, is going to eventually move towards blockchain. And when that happens, it will need its own search engine. So is it correct to say that the graph is like Google, but for blockchain? And how can blockchain data be even indexed? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, so I think it's a good analogy, right? Like all of the world's information was indexed by Google. You had all this great data on the internet, but until Google came out with that index function and the search bar, you couldn't really access that information as a consumer. And it's very similar in the blockchain space. So the graph is indexing all of the world's blockchain data. And if you believe that blockchains are the future of the internet, then the graph will be there to index and query all of the internet's information on the blockchain. And all of that information will be verifiable because it comes from the blockchain. So I do like the analogy. I think where it differs is the graph has a utility work token. And I think tokens are kind of the next evolution of the business model.
Yeah.
Instead of revenue going peer-to-peer to a centralized company, it goes peer-to-peer to participants in the ecosystem. And so the graph, the foundation or edge and node, no one collects fees based off of what happens in that protocol. It all goes peer-to-peer. And so anyone participating in the graph ecosystem can actually commensurate to the value that you're bringing to the protocol, which I think is really powerful. And I also think that that's something that's missing from a lot of the traditional spaces, traditional Web 2, traditional finance. I come from Wall Street, and as an analyst in investment banking, you work 100 hours a week and you're paid the least. You're like the lowest on the totem pole, but you work the most. And then you work your way up that totem pole so that you can kind of become a director, managing director, work less and get paid more. And I just think that's a little bit backwards. I think the more you work, the more you should be compensated. And so when you remove that middleman, all of that happens. And I think that's really powerful and profound, because people can really kind of, it's like the American dream, right? It's like you can start from very little and kind of work your way up. So I think it's really exciting. And these economic models and tokens, if done right, can be really powerful.
It's almost like blockchain is more democratic in nature. Won't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like you mentioned, it gives everybody an opportunity. It's not centralized, it's decentralized. So everybody feels like they're part of the organization. I believe the same is for the graph.
Absolutely, yes. But I will say, there's a lot of like centralized sheep and decentralized,
Yeah.
centralized wolves and decentralized sheep's clothing. And so you do have to be careful about that, because I think in an industry where, there's so much innovation and sometimes people can get lost in the value that can be created without actually creating value. So it's important to really understand, like, are these applications, these dApps decentralized? Is the infrastructure decentralized, or are there kind of central points of failure that you should be cautious of? And I especially think this is important, like as NFTs grow and we're bringing an entire new group of people into this industry, it's important that those NFT platforms are serverless and decentralized, using the Web3 stack, which of course the graph is a part of, but there's other layer one storage networks that are equally important to be decentralized. And so you don't want to spend like $1 million on an NFT and then wake up tomorrow and the platform's gone and your NFT's gone. That's not decentralization. So I think it's really important that we're careful.
So touching base on that topic, your team has extensively worked within the Ethereum ecosystem. So recently, there's been a lot of buzz about the new, London hard fork and how it's led to an increase in pricing, how the entire network is moving towards POS. So what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely. When the graph started 4 years ago, it was mostly just Ethereum and Bitcoin. And so a lot of the standards within the graph are based off of Ethereum and will continue to be. But I do believe we're kind of moving into a multi-blockchain future. And it's important to kind of unite that ecosystem. And the graph is focused on that interoperability at the indexing and query layer. And actually today there was an announcement with the graph and the Graph Foundation around donations to different Ethereum clients. And the graph donated along with Uniswap, Synthetics, and many others. So that was really exciting to see. I think it's important to really support the projects in this space. But with the London hard fork, I think it was great to kind of overcome that milestone that we were looking for so long, or forward to for so long, with EIP 1559. And I think now it's all eyes on the merge, with kind of Ethereum moving to ETH 2.0 and kind of Ethereum becoming the largest proof of stake network. I think is really exciting. And the graph and Ethereum have, shared values. We are both decentralized, open source, permissionless tech, and the graph kind of goes hand in hand with Ethereum and other networks. So yeah.
So, you mentioned a while back about how DeFi is steadily looking to be the future of finance. I mean, you have these incredible projects coming up, multi-billion-dollar investments. So according to you, with DeFi exploding this year, what are your predictions about maybe 2022 or 2023 coming to DeFi? Do you think we're going to see a similar boom, or do you think that, it's just a trend, it's gradually going to fade away? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think DeFi is super profound. I think it's only the beginning. I think a lot of the centralized internet or the centralized finance space will move into the DeFi space. It feels like Wall Street hasn't even kind of caught up with DeFi. There's still so many returns, like comparing what you can do and the returns you can get in DeFi compared to centralized finance. It's insane, the difference. And so I'm excited for Wall Street to kind of catch on, and move a lot of that centralized finance into the blockchain space. And I think really Bitcoin started the innovation, right? Like with Bitcoin, you could move money peer to peer, and that was the first time that could ever happen. Like that spark of innovation, like once innovation sparks, you need to pay really close attention because it's likely to have a lot more innovation to follow. And then we have Ethereum with smart contracts exploding that to every asset class, every use case. And then DeFi with flash loans, like starting off this entire new explosion of innovation. So I think it's only the beginning. And I think Web3 and blockchains will impact every industry in the world. And DeFi, NFTs, and DAOs, it's just the beginning.
You mentioned smart contracts. Bitcoin is scheduled to release its Taproot upgrade, where it's going to get smart contract functionality as well. Do you think that's big news for all of us? Do you think it's big for blockchain?
I think it's exciting. And I know a lot of like Bitcoin maximalists are really excited about DeFi coming to Bitcoin. And, I think there's a lot of tribalism in this space. And I think the Bitcoin maximalists are so important, even though I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I think they're so important for this industry because they kind of hold the bar of the standard, right? But I believe kind of a multi-blockchain future. And if we can bring DeFi to Bitcoin, that's great. If we can bring, all this innovation to Bitcoin, I think there's a space for all of it.
Right. So I want to shift the topic now and again bring it back to the graph, especially something really exciting that I read. That the graph recently released its $2.5 million bug bounty program. Right. That's, if I'm not wrong, it's one of the largest such incentives given out. and you did this in partnership with Immunify. So tell us about what this is. I mean, it's the biggest bug bounty program in the world, right? So how big was this announcement for the Graph's future?
Yeah, I think, security is something to take really seriously in this industry. We've seen so many hacks occur. And so this partnership with Immunify, really, it's one of the largest bug bounties in the world. And I think it's important to, compensate people commensurate to the value that they bring. And that also equates to white hat hackers in the industry. So it's actually an open bounty. So anyone who is passionate about security can actually work towards that bounty. So yeah, I invite anyone listening who has a passion in security or white hat hacking to give it a try within the Graph ecosystem.
Right. So do you believe this is something the Graph is going to do even more with months coming ahead, or is it just a one-time thing?
I think we'll always take security seriously. So I think that could evolve to different areas of security within the Graph ecosystem. But I think we'll always take security seriously. And the Graph Foundation has a large allocation of GRT to provide to different grants across many different areas within the space. So I think that will only continue.
Right. So in the recent past, the ecosystem has also made multiple strategic partnerships, with companies like Streaming Fast, and then you also have developer Figment, if I'm not wrong, with projects in Solana. Like you mentioned, you've been expanding into a multi-blockchain ecosystem. So it definitely sounds like you guys are planning big things ahead. So if you could tell us about some of the more plans that you have ahead, I'm sure our listeners would love to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with both of those core dev grants that you mentioned, Streaming Fast and Figment, we're kind of building in a centralized way in a similar space as the Graph. And I think over time they realize they really resonate with the Graph mission. And so that grant allowed them to really focus on the Graph full time and kind of deprecate any competitive solutions or services, I should say. And really focus on the Graph mission. And I think this just speaks to the power of decentralized protocols. Like no centralized product can compete with the power of decentralization. And it's really exciting. There's so much that's coming up. As you mentioned, we are expanding more to other networks. So right now, the Graph's hosted service supports 24 different networks: Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum. Really, wherever developers go, the Graph will be. And so some of the layer ones that we're expanding to next are Near, Solana, and Polkadot. And so this talent that Streaming Fast and Figment have and bring to the Graph ecosystem is unparalleled. There's not many people that are experts in indexing and improving indexing optimization. And so we're really excited that they're contributing so much already. And I think we'll be able to kind of expand to other networks much more quickly with the help of these different developer teams.
Right. So throughout our interview, you have been very optimistic about blockchain and crypto, which I really appreciate. But if I were to ask you, is there any such one thing that you would like to be changed in the industry? Maybe something that you feel is not being talked about much, something that you personally believe should be talked about and improved.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the level of centralization that still exists in the space. I understand that there's, centralization can be needed as a temporary step, but I want to make sure that that stays temporary and it's not something that kind of becomes long term, because I do think that could put the space in jeopardy if we're like considering or saying everything is decentralized, but then there's so many points of failure. So I want this industry to be cognizant of that. And I also think, we're creating a new financial system, we're creating a new internet, and it's important to have all voices from around the table and include everyone, different diverse voices in the industry. So I do think diversity is something that we can all work on within this space. And I hope just kind of coming on here encourages more women to get involved in this industry, because we need all skill sets. We need every skill set that exists in the world in the blockchain space. And so I think sometimes people can think, oh, I have to be an engineer in order to come in this industry. And it's just not true. We need business skill sets, we need marketing, we need everything, as well as the tech, of course. But yes.
Right. So before we close off the interview, I wanted your thoughts on the recent bullish run in the crypto markets. So BTC went to 50. It's still somewhat around there. It's around 48.5 last time I checked, but it's a big improvement over what it was even last month. So what are your thoughts and comments over the recent run? Even Ethereum went above 3,000. Do you think we can expect these prices to keep rising ahead, or do you think the prices are not important and what is more important is the innovation and the technology behind it?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter for me. I just try to stay focused on the technology and what we're building and the innovation and the number of people that we can touch. And I think, Bitcoin is inevitable. I am very bullish on like Bitcoin and Ethereum kind of doing so much more than what's already happened. And I have been for, over 6 years. And it's great to see, so many more people getting involved in this ecosystem. And I know the price can really attract people, but I hope that the people that it does attract kind of realize that there's so much more beyond the price, and it can really, they can kind of get involved in the different networks, because there's so many ways you can kind of contribute to these different protocols and ecosystems to really earn and kind of change the way we think about work. You can delegate in the Graph network, kind of earn passive income by helping to secure the network and helping indexers increase their stake, but you can also be an LP on Uniswap or participate in Live Peers protocol. There are so many ways that you can get involved in all of these different spaces, and it can be really profound. And I hope it can kind of pull people away from their day jobs and they can become passionate about this space.
That was very inspiring. Thank you for that message, Tegan. So before we close it off, any closing comments on the graph? Anything you want to share to our listeners? Maybe the vision of the graph or any of exciting projects ahead? Balls in your court.
Yeah, absolutely. So the graph supports many different dApp developers across the ecosystem. There's over 23,000 developers now that have built over 22,000 subgraphs on the graph. It's one of the most used protocols in the space. So really invite any developers listening to build subgraphs with the graph. Also, if you're interested in kind of joining the space full time, there are many different open roles between Edge and Node and the Graph Foundation. So invite anyone listening to check that out. Also, if you like DevOps, you could become an indexer on the graph. If you have a talent for recognizing great applications or protocols or projects, I invite you to be a curator on the graph. So there's so many ways to get involved, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm the Kline Venture on Twitter, and my DMs are open.
All right, Tegan, thank you so much for coming to the show. Really appreciate your time and all the incredible things you shared with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.